Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. In this video, we're going to be taking a pretty in-depth look at AMD's latest platform, their AMD 7840U platform, which is on the refresh of the GPD Max 2 that I have here. We're going to be comparing it to the SteamDeck, which is still the low TDP champ out of the bunch. We're also going to be comparing it to AMD's 6800U platform and seeing how everything scales amongst them. There are a few things that we need to take a look at. I'm going to be taking a look at synthetic benchmarks up first. We're going to take out the low end CPU-bound type of test, as well as a GPU-bound test with doing very high settings in those particular synthetic benchmarks. We're going to be targeting them at a resolution that the SteamDeck can run at, so 720p or 800p. We'll be listing all of those for all of these platforms, especially some of the more extensive benchmarks that I'm conducting, where we're taking a look at averages, 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile in those tests. Even for the SteamDeck, we're looking at running Windows on the SteamDeck. So those will have the latest drivers that are available to us from Steam's Windows Resources, which is the March 2023 GPU drivers. For the 6800U platform, I'm using the latest Returnal drivers, which are the 23.4.3 drivers. And then on my 7840U platform, I'm running the latest preview drivers, which are April of 2023. And then for some of the games, I'm using the latest versions. But for specifically, I list the version for The Last of Us in my test because The Last of Us, the version that I tested against was 1.0.4.1, and 1.0.5.0 came out today with a significant CPU optimization, so performance is far better on the newer version. However, I was already testing and got all that done. I'm just recording this now, so it's unfortunate how it comes out. Unfortunate in that we're not seeing better performance from the optimization side of things, but they're all the same versions of the game, just running on different platforms with the drivers that I'm listing here. The other thing to note, as a baseline understanding of what I'm doing here on both the 6800U platform as well as the 7840U platform, both of these platforms, I set the UMA reserve GPU VRAM size to 4 gigabytes. That doesn't mean that the GPU's VRAM that is located on the iGPU is capped at 4 gigabytes. Instead, I'm just reserving 4 gigabytes out of the system memory. Both of those platforms also do have 32 gigabytes of system RAM, whereas the SteamDeck is defaulting to its 1 gigabyte UMA buffer size, so it is a 1 gigabyte reserve. Naturally, for both of these UMAs, it's just a reserve where they set it at what is segmented off from system RAM, and then it can balloon over that. But that's what I set the 6800U and 7840U to. And SteamDeck is naturally 16 gigabytes of system RAM as well. Let's start talking about the synthetic benchmarks first, the CPU-bound one first. So the thing to note here is that I am running the Heaven benchmark. Settings are 720p, all low settings in this particular graph that you're looking at right now. For SteamOS, it is running the OpenGL backend for this, and on Windows, naturally, it is DirectX 11. So one of the things that we're seeing here that's pretty interesting, if you compare the SteamDeck on Windows versus SteamDeck on SteamOS 3.5, we can see that SteamOS is pulling ahead pretty significantly. There's a few things that I want you to pay attention to and make note of. Number one is that the SteamDeck, regardless of OS, is pulling ahead at very low TDPs. From anywhere from 5 watt to 8 watt, we're a good bit ahead of both the 6800U and the 7840U. Only until at 11 watt do we start seeing the 7840U pulling ahead, and around 13 watt do we see the 6800U pulling ahead. This is where, for both those platforms, we really start seeing it start to pick up speed and chug along, where it's actually starting to wake up. The system has enough resources and enough power to do everything on all the resources that need to actually be able to get efficient work done. The other part that we want to take a look at is at the high end, is that on the 18 watt and 20 watt area of 6800U and 7840U is really where we're seeing the efficiency parts of these particular chips themselves. As we start pushing more power into them, we start to have massively diminishing returns. And this is the same thing for the SteamDeck as well. If you take a look at around 10 watt, as we go from 10 watt to 15 watt, the amount of gains that we get out of the SteamDeck really trail off as well. So we start to have diminishing returns at around 11 watt on the SteamDeck. Now, if we take a look at the GPU-bound synthetic benchmarks of the Heaven benchmark, it's looking like Windows, at least insofar as DirectX 11 running, heavy tessellation, and all the other settings to max, is outperforming the OpenGL side. And this could just be related to the OpenGL AMD drivers on Linux side. But the point being is that it is the reversal of sides that we saw from the CPU-bound. We're still pretty much in the same area. In no respect are the 7840U or the 6800U really getting anything ahead of the SteamDeck until those thresholds are met. So around 11 watt for the 7840U and around 13 watt for the 6800U. And around 10, 11 watt is where the SteamDeck starts to peter out and diminishing returns start to come into play. Likewise, at the tail end, 18 to 20 watt is the same for 6800U and 7840U. Now, these are just synthetic benchmarks that we're taking a look at. I like looking at Heaven and DirectX 11 because it paints a very clear picture, and it's easy enough to just do everything on every watt, so you can get a clear graph of how this thing scales. What I'd like you to do is keep these synthetic benchmarks in mind as we look at the next set of benchmarks coming up right now. All right, so here we are taking a look at the beginning of the benchmark data between the differences on all three of these platforms. So this is AMD Van Gogh, this is the SteamDeck naturally, we have AMD 7840U platform, and AMD 6800U platform. It should be noted that all three platforms here, they're all running the latest version of Windows 11 22H2. Driver-wise, we're looking at the latest driver that is available from Valve and their Steam Windows Resources page. So this is the March 2023 build. For 7040U, I'm running the latest April 2023 preview drivers that are available. And for 6800U, I'm running the latest Adrenaline drivers, which is 23.4.3. One thing I want to quickly note is that in the chapters, I will be dividing the different slices here. So you can see that we are looking at 5 watt TDP. When you're looking at the different TDP slices, it'll be noted right here. And on the top, we have the game as well as the settings that I'm using. If you take a look at the chapter links below, they'll be divided by all the TDP slices that these benchmarks are going to be running at. I am running these at 5 watt intervals, so we have 5 watt, 10 watt, 15 watt, 20 watt, and 25 watt benches across these three platforms per title on these particular settings. It just needs to be noted that on SteamDeck, obviously we cap out at 15 watt, so I will continue to show the 15 watt even though we're going to be showing 20 and 25 watt for 7040U and 6800U respectively. So up first, we're looking at Batman Arkham Knight. My settings used is 800p max settings and no NVIDIA GameWorks. The SteamDeck is a low TDP champ. At 5 watt, it is always going to be beating these other platforms to some degree. And at around 10 watt, this is where we're going to start mixing blows, because if we take a look at the synthetic benchmarks once again, for 7040U, we can see that the turning point is around 10 to 11 watt for the SteamDeck or the 7840U to overtake the SteamDeck. And on 6800U, we're really around like 13 to 15 watt before 6800U starts to overtake SteamDeck. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these benches to kind of see where everything stands. If we look here, we can see that at 5 watt, the SteamDeck is basically 50% better averages than 7840U and around 88% better averages over the 6800U. So at 5 watt, really TDP constrained. However, the SteamDeck is doing really good work here at such limited TDP. Let's take a look at 10 watt. Okay, so now we have some really interesting data. We can see that our averages are still really good. However, the SteamDeck is only basically 3.5% better averages over the 7840U. However, if we take a look at our 1 percentile, we can see that the 7840U has 10% better 1 percentile. So that's actually pretty interesting data at the 10 watt scope here, in that we're actually trading blows a little bit on 7840U between the SteamDeck. However, we're still really far behind. So SteamDeck is around 23% better over 1600U. And 1 percentile is looking 50% better. So clearly SteamDeck is still better at 10 watt over 6800U, but 7840U is where we're starting to see it come to life. Let's go ahead and take a look at 15 watt. And here we can start to see this is where the SteamDeck starts losing steam, because really the SteamDeck, especially if we go ahead and take a look back at that synthetic data, we can see that it really starts to have diminishing returns past 11 watt anyway. So we're really not able to get any better particular performance on the SteamDeck going over 11 watt. When we do go to 15 watt, we are still getting marginally better performance, but nothing that is appreciable for the power increase. So if we just take a look at the averages right here, we're going to see that the 7840U is about 33% better averages over the SteamDeck, and the 6800U is about 15% better averages at 15 watt. Now I'm going to leave the 15 watt TDP here for the SteamDeck, and we're going to go to 20 watt for 7840U and 6800U. And here we are taking a look at the 20 watt TDP slices. And once again, if we take a look at the synthetic benchmarks, at the 18 watt mark, this is really where the efficiency standpoint for both the 6800U and the 7840U platform really shows itself. Between 18 watt and 20 watt is really where these platforms shine very well. Going more, we start to see those same diminishing returns that SteamDeck has over 11 watt. But if we take a look at the averages, we're looking at almost 48% better averages over the SteamDeck on 7840U and 21% better averages over the SteamDeck on the 6800U. Following up with 25 watt TDP slices, we'll take a look at the averages, and at 25 watt 7040U is looking like 54% better over averages, and 6800U is 28% better. All right, so here we are taking a look at Cyberpunk 2077. However, there is a caveat here. Remember that for AMD SteamDeck, we are running Windows 11 22H2 here, and Cyberpunk is one game that just really runs much better on Linux. If we were just to compare the frame times between SteamOS and Windows 11 on SteamDeck together, we can see how spiky the frame times are on SteamDeck. And you may think that it's because the drivers that are on SteamDeck aren't as good as the mainline AMD drivers. However, if we take a look at the frame time data, even on AMD 6800U and AMD 7840U, and we push 25 watt into those, we still have frame time spikes frequently happening in the same areas, whereas the frame time is relatively smooth and consistent on SteamOS. Having said that, when we take a look at 5 watt, we're actually looking at 7840U pulling ahead here, at least insofar as when it's compared to Windows. If we take a look, the 7040U is pulling ahead by 20%, which doesn't matter all that much because we're looking at 10 frames a second versus 12 frames a second. So it's not that it's that big of a deal, but we're looking at 20%. The interesting bit is the 1 percentile, where SteamDeck is pulling ahead by 13% on 1 percentile, indicating that it's going to be a fair bit more consistent on SteamDeck as opposed to 7040U. And 6800U is just gasping for air, trying to make anything happen on Cyberpunk 2077 and inside of the 5 watt TDP slice. Let's go ahead and take a look at 10 watt. All right, so inside of this 10 watt space, it looks like SteamDeck is pulling ahead as the winner here. The average is looking like we're 10% better on SteamDeck over 7840U and 47% better over 6800U inside of the 10 watt TDP slice. Moving along inside 15 watt, this is once again where we see the same type of data where 6800U and 7840U are really going to start pulling ahead over the SteamDeck just because of the diminishing returns that happens on the SteamDeck past 11 watt. If we take a look at SteamDeck as our average, the 7840U looks like it's pulling ahead by 34% and 6800U is pulling ahead by 5%. However, if we take a look at 1% lows, 7040U is ahead by 33%, and 6800U is pulling ahead by 20% on 1% lows. Those are rather significant, even though these are pretty low frame rates for 1 percentile. We're going to need to start pushing more power in these settings, or instead of, in this particular case, using no upscaling, what we should do is use FSR 2.2 and really make things just a lot better for ourselves. And once again, when we get these two platforms, 6800U and 7840U at 20 watt, this is where they have their best efficiency, really, between 18 and 20 watt. If we take a look, we're basically 63% better averages on 7840U and 29% better averages on 6800U over the SteamDeck. And being at these 25 watt TDP slices, if we were to take a look at those synthetic benchmarks, we can see that after 20 watt, that's when we start to see the diminishing returns between these two platforms here. So if we take a look, we're at 75% better averages over SteamDeck on 7840U and 41% better averages over SteamDeck on 6800U. All right, next up, we're going to be taking a look at Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Again, this is at 800p. We're using the Ultra settings preset, and I'm running in this with the DX11 backend. One of the reasons why I like this test is because it is its own unique game engine, but it is also one of the last DirectX 11 hard games, and I like to run it just because it stresses CPU and GPU in different ways. It's technically a little bit more CPU hard, so CPU does need to still get active within these particular settings, but with the Ultra settings, we really need significant amount of GPU resources to actually have good performance. And looking at 5 watt, we can see that 7840U is actually not doing too bad. We're only like 2% better on SteamDeck at 5 watt. Our 1 percentile is 15% better on SteamDeck at 5 watt, but you can clearly see the difference between what is able to be accomplished inside of this power scope between these platforms, and 6800U is just lagging hard behind. All right, once again, taking a look at the 10 watt TDP slice of these benchmarks here, we can see that the SteamDeck is once again pulling ahead here. Again, 10 to 11 watt is really the sweet efficiency zone for the SteamDeck, and we're seeing that pull ahead real nice here. 7840U is actually not doing too bad. SteamDeck's only 20% better over 7840U, and we're looking 41% better over 6800U. Obviously, these frame rates aren't great at all, but we can see how much work is actually able to be accomplished with these particular settings, which are hard to hit inside of 10 watts. So overall, pretty good. But having said that, 7840U isn't doing too bad considering. All right, looking at the 15 watt TDP slice of these benchmarks, once again, we can see the same old story happening once again, that the SteamDeck starts to fall behind at 15 watt just because of diminishing returns. 7040U is pulling ahead 26% on averages, and 6800U is pulling ahead around 7% over the SteamDeck on averages. All right, looking at the 20 watt TDP slice for Deus Ex Mankind Divided, this is pretty interesting data. We don't see this 7840U pulling ahead as far as we did compared to the other games. So taking a look at averages, we're 35% better on 7840U over SteamDeck and 28% better on 6800U over SteamDeck. But reasonably speaking, like looking at our 1% lows and even our 0.2 percentile, 6800U is really close to 7840U in this particular game test. For DirectX 11, we're not really pulling ahead all that much. And now taking a look at the 25 watt TDP slices for 6800U and 7840U, we once again see the pretty much the same story here. Actually, the 1 percentile on 6800U pulls ahead a little bit. We're 2% better 1 percentile on 6800U. That's pretty interesting data. We're looking at, I mean, they're basically neck and neck. These two, 25 watt between 6800U and 7840U on Deus Ex Mankind Divided, in these particular settings here, we almost see no benefit whatsoever on 7840U over 6800U. All right, for our next game, we're going to be taking a look at God of War. I'm running at 800p native, so there is no upscaling whatsoever. I don't like showing FSR2 in these games just because FSR is a rapidly changing technology, and it'll be easier for us to compare later on with just using native rendering resolution. I am using the low settings preset. If we take a look, we can see at the 5 watt TDP slice here, the SteamDeck is pulling ahead. I mean, even at 5 watt, this is actually really impressive that we're getting 19 FPS average on God of War at 800p native. That's really good. 7840U is actually doing pretty decent, all things considered. SteamDeck still pulls ahead, still the low TDP champ by and large. However, the 6800U is just gasping for air, not able to do much at all. We're seeing that the SteamDeck is 60% better averages over the 6800U inside of 5 watt, and only 7% better averages over the 7840U. So in this particular test, 7840U is actually doing a reasonable job keeping up with the SteamDeck. All right, now looking at our 10 watt TDP slice here, once again, we can still see that the SteamDeck is still king here. Once again, 10 watt, 11 watt is where the SteamDeck is going to shine, and 40 FPS average really for at 10 watt for God of War with these particular settings. Really impressive to see. We're at 35 watt average here. The SteamDeck is pulling ahead by around 12% average, but is 90% better, 87% better over the 6800U inside of 10 watt, which is ludicrous. But the 7040U is really doing a fantastic job, all things considering. The 7040U not doing too shabby. Pretty good to see. All right, looking at the 15 watt TDP slice here, this is actually interesting data. We see that the 6800U is kind of on the bottom here, although this is kind of cheating a little bit. Even though the SteamDeck is pulling better averages, the 1 percentile is taking a beating here. The 6800U's 1 percentile is around 24% better here. I would really say that the 6800U should be in the middle of the pack, which is pretty much true in the 15 watt zone, but still really interesting data when we take a look at what's going on here, that the 6800U is really just kind of lagging behind. But man, look at the 7840U. It's a powerhouse, just pulling ahead tremendously. We're 38% better over SteamDeck at 15 watt. Pretty impressive, really. Almost 40% better at 15 watt over the SteamDeck. We're 43% better over 6800U at 15 watt. Really interesting data to see. All right, now looking at the 20 watt TDP slices for 6800U and 7040U, obviously we're still keeping the SteamDeck at 15 watt here. We can see that the 6800U finally woke up and decided to come into the office today. We are looking like 56% better on 7840U over the SteamDeck and 30% better on 6800U over the SteamDeck. This is where we start to see things really shine for 6800U and 7840U, and the SteamDeck will start to lag behind, but we're obviously pushing more power into the platform, obviously. Okay, for our 25 watt TDP slice here, we're looking at 62% better averages on 6840U over SteamDeck and 43% better averages on 6800U over SteamDeck. By and large, we can see that these are starting to peter out as we push more power into them. We're going to start getting severe diminishing returns. Going up to 30 watt and 35 watt will show less and less gains. You'll still get slightly more gains, but for the amount of power that you're going to be putting into there, it's really not recommended or advisable, but you could totally do it if you wanted to. But this is pretty much what you're going to be looking at. Still very impressive from a very impressive showing for 7040U in this particular game. All right, the next game that we're going to be taking a look at is Horizon Zero Dawn. Once again, we're running 800p native, and we are using the Favor Performance preset. At 5 watt TDP, once again, the SteamDeck is the reigning champ at low TDP. This time, we're not seeing as big of gains or being as close to SteamDeck as the 7040U was in previous games. We're looking at 33% better on SteamDeck over 7840U and 74% better over 6800U. 6800U is just dying for air here, not able to keep up. Let's go ahead and take a look at 10 watt. All right, looking at our 10 watt TDP slice here, once again, same old story. SteamDeck is coming out on top. SteamDeck is basically 18% better averages over 7840U and 48% better averages over 6800U. However, 7840U is pulling ahead a little bit better, having a little bit of better time in 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile land. All right, looking at our 15 watt TDP slice here, this is where 6800U and 7840U should be pulling ahead over the SteamDeck, and it is. If we take a look, we're at averages. 7040U is about 27% better over the SteamDeck at 15 watt, and 6800U is about 10% better over the SteamDeck at 15 watts. All right, looking at our 20 watt TDP slice here for these two platforms, we're looking at 56% better averages on 7840U and 35% better averages on 6800U over the SteamDeck respectively. This is where we're starting to see pretty good gains in these particular wattage zones. We're actually able to, at 20 watt on 7840U, have a more comfortable 60 FPS territory here. So this is pretty good settings for Horizon Zero Dawn for a 60 FPS type of gameplay, a consistent 60 FPS. Obviously, your averages will be a little bit higher, but the 1 percentile is where you're going to start to feel it. All right, looking at our 25 watt TDP slice for 7040U and 6800U, 6800U really didn't get much at all from pushing 5 more watts into the platform. Again, you're going to start seeing severe diminishing returns past 20 watt. Likewise for the 7840U, going over 25 watt especially, severe diminishing returns will be starting to happen here. So really at 20 watt, I mean, you're getting what, a very consistent 60 FPS at 25 watt. I would say that you could just do that at 20 watt itself and still have a really good time and save yourself 5 watts. So really at this point, with these particular settings, obviously you can change settings a little bit. All right, the next game we're looking at here is Metro Exodus 800p, the lowest settings preset. And once again, we see the SteamDeck just pulling ahead here, but I have to say 7840U is not doing that bad of a job in showing up the averages, but the 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile make this a far better experience on the SteamDeck itself, where we have pretty poor results for 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile on 7840U, but its averages would make you think otherwise by looking at this. This is kind of an exaggerated look at this. I wouldn't say that this is anywhere close to where the SteamDeck is, and the SteamDeck is clearly pulling ahead here. Let's go ahead and take a look at 10 watt. All right, here we are taking a look at the 10 watt TDP slice for this particular game. And once again, 7840U is really holding its own. I mean, it's very, very similar to what the SteamDeck is doing, and very, very similar to what the synthetic benchmarks have shown in terms of the crossover event of when 7840U really starts to pull ahead over the SteamDeck. In that 11 watt is where 7840U really starts to gain ground. And this is a perfect example of it compared against those synthetic benches. So really interesting data to see here. If we take a look, we're looking at 5% better on SteamDeck at 10 watt, but I mean, it's almost marginally different between these two platforms at 10 watt, even though SteamDeck is clearly winning. And if we take a look at 6800U, we're 46% better averages on SteamDeck. 6800U just looks like a laggard compared to these platforms comparatively. So just gasping for air, but 7840U not doing too bad, but SteamDeck still low TDP champ, holding its own. All right, looking at the 15 watt TDP slice, now we can see the 6800U has woken up, decided to come to the battle. We can take a look at averages. 6800U is 21% better averages over SteamDeck, 49% better averages on 7840U. Really good showing overall, close to that 50% mark, even at 15 watt combined. So pretty good showing from the 7840U over the SteamDeck inside of 15 watt here. Even for our 1 percentile, we're looking at 36% better on 7840U. So overall, 7840U is just killing it here. Okay, looking at the 20 watt TDP slice here, this is rather striking difference. We're looking at 79% better performance on averages over the SteamDeck at 20 watt versus SteamDeck at 15 watt. We're looking at 41% better averages on the 6800U. 7840U is just devouring this engine right here. It's really impressive to see what was going on here. This is really impressive. Let's take a look at 25 watt. All right, taking a look at our 25 watt TDP slice for Metro Exodus at 800p. We can see the large difference here. We're at 93% better averages, 25 watt on 7840U. That's a really impressive showing there. Almost clearing double performance on averages. We could probably make full double here if we just pushed this up to 30 watt. I would wager that we'd be very close to 2x performance, which is what the Z1E was touting that we would see between the SteamDeck at 15 watt versus 30 or 35 watt. That looks like that would be correct in this particular game instance. Really interesting data to take a look at this from Metro Exodus. All right, the next game we're going to take a look at is Red Dead Redemption 2. This is using the Vulkan backend and the lowest settings preset. So you have to basically oscillate the settings to go right and then left again to recalibrate it to lowest settings. And then we're going to take a look at the 5 watt TDP slice for this particular game. Once again, SteamDeck is just coming out on top here. We're looking at 20% better averages over on SteamDeck over 7840U and 42% better averages on SteamDeck over 6800U. Taking a look at our 10 watt TDP slices here, we actually see that the 7840U is not doing too bad, especially when we factor in the 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile here. The 7840U has a more consistent experience overall, and I would dare say is a probably stable enough 30 FPS experience at 10 watt TDP for the 7840U. Naturally, you would still have that in for the SteamDeck as well on 10 watt, but really interesting considering the differences in this data. But comparing the averages, the SteamDeck is basically 15% better on averages at 10 watt, and over the 6800U is 37% better averages over the 6800U. Taking a look at our 15 watt TDP slice here, we can see that the 7840U really does a good job here. I mean, this is really impressive. We're almost at 60 FPS average. I would wager that this might actually be pretty fine to play. This wouldn't be too bad to play at a reasonable frame rate. This is actually really impressive to see where we're not actually able to hitting 60 on 6800U, but on 7040U within 15 watt, this is really impressive to see. If we look at SteamDeck as our baseline, 7040U is 36% better averages and 6800U is 11% better averages over the SteamDeck. Taking a look at our 20 watt TDP slice here, the 7840U is having a really good 60 FPS experience here, especially with these 1% lows. At 20 watt TDP, you're going to have a really good 60 FPS experience. On 6800U, we start to come up to that, but our 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile are pretty poor in comparison. If we use SteamDeck as our baseline, the averages are 62% better on 7040U and 30% better on 6800U. Taking a look at our 25 watt TDP slice here, this is pretty much diminishing returns. We're not really getting much better. So it really wouldn't be recommendable to go over 20 watt inside of these particular settings. We have a clean 60 FPS here, even at 20 watt. I would even wager at 18 watt, 7040U is going to be good. 6800U is going to have a better time inside of 25 watt here. If we take a look at averages, we're 70% better on 7840U over SteamDeck and 34% better on averages on 6800U over the SteamDeck. All right, the next game that we're going to be taking a look at is Returnal. Once again, we are looking at the lowest settings possible, 720p native, no upscaling whatsoever. What's interesting here is within this 5 watt TDP, the 7840U is pulling ahead. The reason I wanted to include this game is because Returnal is massively GPU bound almost all the time, especially on these low power platforms. I thought it was going to be interesting data, and sure enough, the 7840U is showing just really good results in comparison between these platforms. So really interesting data to see. It might be that there are drivers issues on Van Gogh here for the Windeck, but even 6800U is falling behind. Really good showing from 7040U. Let's go ahead and take a look at 10 watt. All right, taking a look at our 10 watt TDP slice here. The SteamDeck obviously wakes up. This is where it finds itself very efficient, but overall compared to the 7840U, I mean, these things are like neck and neck. So the 7840U is doing a fantastic job here. I mean, like basically one for one. The 6800U is the only one that falls behind to any degree. The SteamDeck is 31% better than the averages on 6800U. All right, taking a look at our 15 watt TDP slice for Returnal on these platforms, 7840U is just pulling ahead massively over the SteamDeck. We're basically 46% better averages on 7840U over the SteamDeck and 8% better averages on 6800U over the SteamDeck, but the 7840U is really pulling ahead considerably at these same wattages. So really impressive showing from the 7840U. Taking a look at the 20 watt TDP slice here, taking a look at the averages as SteamDeck as the baseline, we're looking at 61% better performance at 20 watt on 7840U over the SteamDeck and around 30% better averages on 1600U over the SteamDeck. Taking a look at our 25 watt TDP slice here, using the SteamDeck as our baseline, we are looking at 68% better averages on the 7840U over SteamDeck and around 42% better averages on 1600U over the SteamDeck. All right, for our next game, we're going to be taking a look at Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 800p lowest settings. 5 watt on SteamDeck is once again the winner here. If we take a look at averages, SteamDeck is about 23% better averages over the 7840U and 41% better averages over the 6800U. Taking a look at our 10 watt TDP slice here for this particular game, we see that SteamDeck is still coming out on top. This is where we find it to be most efficient. Over the 7840U, we're looking at around 18% better averages on the Steam Deck and 25% better averages over the 6800U. All right, taking a look at our 15-watt TDP slice here, really interesting data overall. So you can see the Steam Deck is falling behind what we normally see at 15-watt. But if we take a look at the 600U versus the 7840U, these things are pretty much neck and neck, with the 7840U barely pulling ahead much at all, like 10% better, 2% better on averages, 10% better, 1 percentile. Marginal increase at best, and not something that we normally see. Very little increase over the Steam Deck in relationship to previous platforms going up to like 50%, but being 30% better, I think, is something that I think we're going to see most often and not usually an outlier like Metro Exodus. Taking a look at our 20-watt TDP slice here, if we look at Steam Deck as our baseline average, 7040U is about 58% better over the averages on Steam Deck and 43% better on 6800U over the Steam Deck. Taking a look at our 25-watt TDP slices for Shadow of the Tomb Raider in these particular settings, it's really interesting that the 6800U really keeps up very well with this 7840U. It's marginal increases at best, like 10%, 8%. This is very little at all. If we take a look at Steam Deck as our baseline, we are looking at 66% better averages over the Steam Deck at 15-watt versus 25-watt 7040U, and likewise for the 6800U, we're 53% better averages over the Steam Deck. All right, and for our last game, we're going to be taking a look at The Last of Us Part 1. This is version 1.0.4.1, so this is not the latest update, 1.0.5.0, which has the CPU optimizations. So these are all the same between all of these, but obviously the performance will be heavily increased by going to 5.0, 1.0.5.0, but I'm showing you these settings anyway. So we're looking at 800p lowest preset, and again, no upscaling. Once again, looking at our 5-watt TDP slice, the Steam Deck is pulling ahead. We're 23% better than the 7840U and 63% better than the 6800U. Taking a look at our 10-watt TDP slice here, Steam Deck is once again coming out on top. We're 36% better than 7840U and 53% better than the 6800U. Steam Deck still coming out on top. Again, 10-watt is just where you're going to find its efficiency zone for the Steam Deck. Really surprised to see where the 7840U is finding itself in this particular instance here. All right, if we take a look at our 15-watt slice here, once again, we see that one instance that happened in that previous game as well, where we are showing the Steam Deck in the middle of the pack just because the averages are a little bit higher. However, we take a look at the 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile. Naturally, the 6800U is a better platform overall, and I would suggest that it's actually in second place here, but it's falling behind just because of the slightly behind averages. All right, taking a look at our 20-watt slice for 7040U and 6800U. If we use the Steam Deck at 15-watt as our baseline, we're looking at 30% better averages on 7040U and 27% better averages on 6800U. Between the difference between 6800U and 7840U, they pretty much are neck and neck. These are barely any difference between these two platforms whatsoever. It's really interesting data that we have here as well. And closing it out with 25-watt TDP slice. Once again, we see that the 6800U and 7840U, actually the 6800U pulls ahead. Wow, what an upset. The 6800U, the last benchmark we're going to take a look at, pulls ahead here. Well done, 6800U. This could be because of 7840U's current drivers. I am running the April preview drivers, so this could just be the difference between the 24.4.3 drivers that are on 6800U. Perhaps when I have a BIOS and driver updates for 7840U, this will be worth retesting. If we take a look at Steam Deck as our baseline average, we're only at 33% better between the both platforms. So really no sense in going over 20 watt whatsoever on Last of Us. You should really modify your settings. Also going to the updated version 1.0.5.0 would be far more interesting as well. That'll cap off our look at benchmarks. Okay, so what can we pull from information from these particular graphs? Number one, Steam Deck is still the low TDP champ, no matter which way we look at it. Obviously, we're looking at this on Windows side. For the most part, SteamOS, and like if we take a look at Cyberpunk specifically, Cyberpunk is a game that just clearly runs better on Linux with AMD hardware versus AMD on Windows hardware. I have a bunch of frame time spikes. Even when I push 6800U and 7840U to 25 watt, I'm still getting spikes in frame time. And it is far more smooth and consistent on SteamOS. So SteamOS will have some games that are clearing away better on Windows, but then there is a reversal of that as well, where like Forza Horizon 5 is going to be better on Windows. And there's a lot of different games that Windows is just going to be better than SteamOS. So there's going to be trading blows between both those platforms. I'm still going to be doing SteamOS benchmarks later on. I just wanted to get this video out just to have a kind of apples to apples comparison because I had that available. And then when we just take a look at 7840U itself, it's pretty interesting insofar as that data is kind of a little bit all over the place. And I only mean that insofar as when I try to install 23.4.3 drivers, they won't install. So there's another official driver set that is going to be officially available for 7840U, but that's not available right now. So I'm still running preview drivers on the 7840U platform. So I have this data set right now. We can be able to take a look at this later on again and see where things land. But some games we see a ginormous improvement, and then some games we see barely any improvement. So like 6800U and 7840U are pretty much identical when you go to 20 and 25 watt. But when we go to lower wattages, 7840U picks up. So there's some interesting characteristics at 7840U. It is approaching where the SteamDeck is at the lower TDP scale. At 10 watt, we're kind of trading blows with the SteamDeck a lot. SteamDeck is still winning largely overall, but really impressive to see from the 7840U platform in general. Overall, 7840U looks like it's pretty good overall. I'm actually really excited looking at a lot of the stuff. I'm hoping that driver improvements later on can even out a lot of the stuff and we can somehow try to extract a bit more performance. Based on what we're seeing right now, I actually really like how low the 7840U can go. At 10 watt, we're doing reasonably well in a lot of those benches. It's only at 20 and 25 watt that there's some oddities going on with regard to how we look at differences between the 6800U and the 7840U. Sometimes we're bonanzas better, and sometimes it's absolutely the same. So that's it for me right now. I will be doing some more follow-up videos on the 7840U platform. We'll be taking a look at ray tracing. That should be interesting from the dual-issued pipeline that is an RDNA 3 versus RDNA 2. That is supposed to have some improvements there, so I'll take a look at some games that I took a look at on the 6800U platform and see if I can find any standout winners there as well. So that's where we're looking at 7840U now. It looks like this is going to be a pretty exciting year for handhelds in general. Hopefully with driver updates, things are going to be a little bit better. In any event, as always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.